Hello, everybody. I'm Jonni Campbell, and I'm on the chopping block at visceralchange.org.
Welcome back, everybody, to this episode of The Chopping Block. As always, trying to bring you some of the best minds in the world of DEI and also introduce to you all how DEI very much intersects with all that we do. I am here with a wonderful guest, a special guest, somebody who is right here in Tucson, Arizona with me. So you'd wonder why we weren't in person together, but down for consistency, we're just going to keep it at a distance. I'm here with my good friend, Jonni Campbell. Jonni, how are you?
I'm good. Thank you so much for having me on the chopping block. I'm so excited to be here.
Oh, of course. I can't wait for you to share your story. I had the pleasure, by the way, for my listeners, of hopping on to Jonni's podcast and sort of little interview series she does where I had a chance to share about visceral change and talk through a little bit about myself and my journey. And in that discussion, getting to know Jonni a little bit more, I said, wow, you would be perfect for the chopping block. So Jonni's been gracious enough to join us, and I can't wait for you all to hear some of our discussion. So Jonni is a model, obviously, an actress, and founder and co-president of Differently Abled Entertainment. And you all are based right here in Tucson, yeah?
Correct. Yeah. Yeah.
Go ahead. If you got ask more if you wanted to.
Brand new nonprofit that we were established in 2021 finally. And so we're just kind of getting out there.
Good, yeah. And I'm excited to talk more about DAE, sort of its genesis, where it comes from, and sort of the vision. But first, let's get to know Jonni a little bit. So Jonni, you hail from Nebraska. Is it Scotts Bluff in particular? Is that the area or around that area?
That's the area. I'm from Western Nebraska, the Panhandle.
Western Nebraska.
I'm from Oshkosh, which is in Garden County. It's a little little further into the Sandhills than Scotts Bluff. Scotts Bluff is like the main city hub, like the closest big town that's around there. And Scotts Bluff isn't really even all that big. It's got like 20,000. So,
gotcha.
But Oshkosh has like 900. So, it was the big
born and raised?
No, I was born in Alaska. I lived up in Alaska mostly until I was like 8. And then, but we moved around a lot when I was growing up, and I spent some time in Colorado and Montana. Yeah, a little bit of all over, but I say I'm from Nebraska because I moved down there. Well, we lived there for a little bit when I was in my grade school years, like 3rd grade, 4th grade, 5th grade. And then I was in Montana, and then we were back in Nebraska for my 8th grade and mostly through high school, although I spent a little bit of my freshman year at Camelback High School in Phoenix, Arizona. So a little bit of all over.
Now, I were your parents in the military? Did folks just get different jobs across the country?
I wasn't a military brat. I was a hippie kid.
Okay. All right. Bouncing around a little bit. Okay, I got you.
Yeah.
So talk about that a little bit more then, Jonni. Talk about just your experiences as a youth growing up in so many different environments, and maybe a little bit about how that shaped the person who became Jonni Campbell down the road.
Really, yeah, it totally has shaped who I am. And being in a lot of rural areas, like especially up in Alaska in the 80s when it was still very, kind of rugged and stuff like that, and bluegrass festivals, and like my memories is very nature oriented, but I've lived around a lot of places that, even though I guess we're getting taken over, like Alaska, I mean, it was in the process of like kind of colonization at that point in time, because like, I mean, I've been like everywhere that I lived, I've been around different indigenous cultures. from up
Okay.
in Alaska for the Inuit, and like learning about their cultures and just having an appreciation for native cultures, because I was around a lot of, I myself, just because I was born in Alaska, I can claim that I'm an Alaska native, technically. And I don't like agree that I'm like that I can claim that term, just because I was born there, um, having the background that I have. But it's
Sure.
given me an interesting perspective. And when I was younger, my mother is very much respectful of other cultures and stuff
Sure.
like that. And so, growing up, and my dad was, into hunting and stuff like that. But also my dad wasn't just a trophy hunter. I mean, he hunted to feed our family. And
Sure. Yes.
so those were things that, we could kind of learn and take from, and and appreciate, like, kind of that way of living. Because when I was growing up, like in Alaska, like we were clearing the property, like there was no electricity. We were hauling water, like, and like collecting berries, and like my dad hunted and all that to like keep us fed. I mean, you're
Yeah.
up in Alaska, and there wasn't, like, I mean, not that there wasn't any stores or anything like that, because there were, but still, like, if you were out kind of out in the boonies a little bit, like getting to that stuff wasn't always that easy. And so
No,
you
I can
had to like
imagine.
really learn survival. And so that was my younger years of growing up, was kind of like living, like now they kind of call it like living off the grid. But
Yeah.
like,
Right. Right.
just like that was just how, I was, that's how I grew up when I was really little, is
Now.
hauling water and no electricity, and we had a generator and all that. But that's because there weren't any power lines where I lived. There weren't
Sure.
paved roads. Now, like, I mean, I left Alaska when I was 8. I left Alaska in 1988, and now I've seen pictures, because I mean, I grew up more down in the Kenai Peninsula,
Hmm.
down around a little town called Kasilof. That's where I went to like kindergarten and stuff like that. Was at Tustamina Elementary School. But that's where I spent up until 3rd grade, was at Tustamina. And now I see pictures of the Kenai Peninsula, and like I remember that highway between Kenai and Anchorage being like 2 lane and just really crappy. And I think now it's like a 6 lane highway or something, you
Yeah.
know. And so,
Mm.
and I haven't been back to Alaska since I was very young. And so I want to take my children back, and I want to see it and see, but it's also, I don't know, it's just interesting. And that's given me a perspective, as far as I've just lived in a lot of places. And then in Nebraska, there's the Sioux are all around there, the Lakota and the Ogallala, like down not far from Oshkosh is Ogallala. That's a city that's named after the Oglala Sioux that
Sure.
were drove away from there. Um and so like I've always kind of had an interest and a respect for a lot of different cultures, and being around a lot of different places, and then
Right.
always kind of being the new kid and being an outcast and kind of being different. And when I moved down to the States from Alaska, I'd have people ask me if I lived in an igloo, and like
Yeah. Right. Right. These
stuff. They're like,
microaggressions pop. Yeah.
yeah, and so it's like,
Yeah.
I know I lived in a house. We didn't have electricity, but we had a house.
But you had a house, and so it's yeah. So you a follow up question I had, you actually sort of touched on, which was whether or not living around, in this case, so many indigenous folks, or in spaces that honor, at least on paper, right, the indigenous culture, if that impacted your understanding of culture. And it sounds like it did, and feel free to expand on that a little bit. My other question I wanted to ask you was sort of the ways in which you all lived off the grid, as you sort of named, as it would be the language today. Um, did your peer group, did your friend group, did it mirror that? If I were to meet your friends at that point in time, would they also be folks who lived off the grid? Or, um, so I guess the question I'm trying to ask is, uh, I'll pause. I'll come back around. Let me ask you that question. Your friend group and folks you find yourself surrounded by, were they also very much off the grid, or was it a nice little eclectic group, or how'd that show up for you coming up?
It was pretty mixed when I was a kid, because yeah, at the time there was a lot of, things that were getting built and stuff like that. I mean, Alaska at that point had only been a state for like 20 years, not even like so when
Yeah.
I left, it was made a state in
1959.
19,
Yeah.
yeah, and so like all of these roads and electricity and all these things that people were building, that was just starting to really happen. And
Mhm.
so, yeah, there was a lot of other families that were living how my family was living. Like, that's a lot of my parents' friends and stuff like that. It was like, and they'd all work together. You know what I mean? You go over and help clear your property, and then you come over and you help clear our property, and then we help build your house, and then you help build our house. I remember seeing like at least 4 or 5 houses get built when I was growing up, like, and that my
Right.
family helped be a part of building, and like the properties, like cutting down the trees, clearing the property out to nothing to be able to build a house, you know what I mean? And you think of, you can't just, it's not like when you come to Tucson and you find an empty lot, or even out in the
Right.
desert here where it's just kind of, I mean, there might be cactuses or whatever you have to clear out, but
Right.
no, this Alaska, forest that they're
Mm.
clearing out to build these roads and houses and all that. And so,
Right.
yeah, it was a good mix because there were towns already established. Like Anchorage was already pretty big. Kenai,
Yep.
Sedona, they were pretty big.
Yep.
There were towns, and so, but the people that were like going outside in those smaller towns and those other villages and stuff like that, there was still a lot of people that were running off of generators and hauling
Yeah.
water and all that stuff because you didn't have a choice. There weren't any power lines up yet. They were still building all those things.
Yeah. Yeah. And Alaska is purchased sort of 100 years before almost it becomes a state. So it's just used for, in many ways, military purposes, but also as a
Hmm.
territory in different ways. And so I'm hearing it sounds like folks are trying to play catch up now. Like, oh wait, we've added this 50th state. Now folks have to have the privileges that come with being a state, and courtesy of the 14th Amendment and other things that go with that. So it's interesting to hear you really speak 20 years in from experience that yeah, this is very much still a work in progress as we engage. And I don't think many people realize that about Alaska and even Hawaii. They came in the same year.
Well,
That
it, I'm
they weren't
sorry to
always
interrupt.
here.
Yeah, I'm sorry to interrupt. You just touched on something because yeah, it's like, but now they have all these like survivor uh reality TV shows of like
In
living in the
Alaska,
bush in
right?
Alaska. And it's because I mean it's still kind of like that a little bit, although when I watch it, it's just very comical to me, like these shows,
Yeah,
because
like
like I mean, it's like, you know, like the whole city slickers thing. There's people up there now that like my dad, like, and my family, like they had their purpose up there. Like they knew what they were doing, you know what I mean?
yeah,
Like they went up there with
yeah,
some knowledge of how to take care of themselves and stuff. And now there's people up there that just like they get up there thinking that it's gonna be like a lot easier than what it is or a lot whatever. And it just I watch some of those shows though every now and then. It just kind of just cracks me up. But yeah, that's where I mean Alaska is still like way behind everywhere else because I mean really, I mean
uh,
that's still only been it hasn't even been a state for 50 or 100 years. Like
yeah.
only
No,
been like really 50 years.
right?
So,
Yeah, and that's a
yeah.
yeah, that's something I think a lot of folks don't realize and kind of speed past.
And
So,
it
so
was still like you said, I mean, yes, it had been a territory for a while, but it was still like, I mean, it was just barely being used. There wasn't a lot of stuff.
that's right.
And a lot of the native, cultures that were there and the tribes and all that were there, they were still like fully living their culture and their life.
Yeah,
It wasn't like down in the continental states where they've
sure.
been on reservations already for hundreds of years,
Right,
you know.
right, right.
And so there's that dynamic too. It was very different. And I remember growing up, like they were still there was fight back, and standing up against some of the stuff that they were trying to bring in because, technology and all that, but like the oil platforms and all that. And I
Hmm.
remember just hearing a lot of stuff about it because like on my mom's side, they're very hippie-ish, okay? And so I had my
Okay.
aunt that was very much always like, save the wells and no oil and all that like 80s like raw that was going on. Like that's what I grew up with on like that side. And then I had my dad who was the welder and the guy that was getting the jobs, building the oil, platforms and stuff like that. My dad, had a part in a lot of that stuff going up. And so it's just I got to hear both sides of the argument
Yeah.
growing up, and it gave me an interesting perspective.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Um, so there's certainly, right, an element of class at play here where you don't have access to, right, you're on from a generator. You said you didn't have electricity. You talked about the wells, which indicates level of water and access to that. So there's a class discrepancy here at play where you don't have access to those privileges in the same way as maybe other white folks in Alaska might have had access to those privileges, and other people in general. Um, did you ever find yourself as a kid, especially in particular, or I know you said your parents sort of identified more sort of the hippie movement, and so maybe they saw the world a little bit differently in terms of what satisfaction looked like and what happiness was. Did you ever find yourself saying, why me, why us, why don't we have electricity, and all my other friends do? And did you find yourself a little challenged by that, disgruntled, or did you see this as this is the way of life and this is how I sort of interpret the world as I move forward?
Yeah, like, well, I mean, because like we had a generator and stuff like that. So it's not like we never had any electricity. It was just we had to use it sparingly
Sure.
and stuff like that. But like, yeah, going out to the outhouse at like 3 o'clock in the morning in the wintertime in Alaska, that's not real fun. It's like,
Right.
oh man, I really wish we had a bathroom right about now when you gotta sit your butt down on that outhouse seat. Woo! But my dad, like he ran a heater out there and like it was low on the generator, and and so he got it to where it wasn't so bad. Um but but yeah, I mean, I didn't like I said, there were so many other people that were doing the same thing that yeah, there was other ones, and it wasn't really until like when other kids would point it out. Like
Right. Yes.
that's when I was, and as I got older, and because I mean, I did a lot of secondhand store type stuff and all that. And so, and they're in like the mid 80s when like name brand things like really started becoming a big issue,
Hmm.
in like the late 80s and stuff like that. That's when other kids would bring it to my attention that like I was subpar or whatever, or like I was a thrift store kid and
Mm.
or whatever, instead of like I didn't go to JC Penney and get my stuff. I
Right.
don't think I shopped at JC Penney until I was like 35 years old. Like,
Right. JC Penney.
like yeah, I mean that's yeah, shout out to how old I am, I guess. But like that was like the
Classics.
place that the cool kids went when
They're
I
still
was
floating around.
yeah, well, yeah, I mean they're still out there, but it's just not as like nowadays. I don't know what the cool place is either
Right.
because
Yeah.
I still
Right.
I'm still a thrift store girl. I
I'm
just
with you.
oh, and now though I love it though when I can tell somebody like I got this for $3. Mhm.
That's it. My wife is the same thing. She's always excited about those deals. Yeah. I mean, listen, man, we came up on coupons. My mom was notorious for those.
Yeah,
I'm not talking about on the phone either. We had to cut it out of the newspaper
right.
or a magazine, bring it with you, and and argue it. Like, no, this is still good for this day, and as we move forward, yeah. And I asked my question because, and we'll talk more about this as we go on, but and I may have said this to you. I can't remember what we talked about on our last go around. We talked about a lot of stuff, but like there's this old quote I always hearken to that Kenny Rogers said that his mom told him, which is, "You're no more as an adult than what was put into you as a child." And that really resonates with me because I found that a lot of times, not always, the people who are most oriented to maybe earthly things, individualism, just really anything that diversity and inclusion, oftentimes have an introduction to that early on. Right? It was brought to them in a particular way that really shows up later on in life, and just in a more burgeoned, a more seasoned, way, right? That's demonstrated a little bit differently. That's you see it's honed in a particular way. And because you bounced around, I was wondering how relevant that was. So continue that journey for us. you left Alaska, and where did you go next? And then take us into sort of your freshman year at high school.
Okay, so from Alaska, we went down to Nebraska. Well, stopping in Colorado along the way. Spent a little bit of time in Denver before we went to Nebraska. Like yeah, my third grade year, all right, I left Testamina Elementary School, and then I went to school in Denver, Colorado for a little bit, and then I went to school in Ogallala, Nebraska for a little bit, and then Venango, Nebraska for a little bit, and then we settled in Mitchell, Nebraska at the end of my third grade year, and I was there through fifth grade. And then we went up to Montana, and I spent sixth grade in Great Falls to the end of sixth grade, and then like the last couple months of sixth grade and all of seventh grade in a little town called Geraldine. That's like the school was K through 12. It was the first time I lived in a lot of small different places throughout, but it was like one of the first places that I was like, everybody goes to school here. Like it's K through 12 for like the
Right.
whole, like
Wow.
all of these towns that are around. Like it was like the smallest place I'd ever been, but it was really cool.
Yeah.
It was an interesting place to live. And then we went to Oshkosh, my eighth grade year, and then yeah, I was there all except for that little bit of time my freshman year that I was here in Phoenix, here in Arizona, and that's where I fell in love with Arizona, you know. And at first I fell in love with Phoenix, and I just knew when I grew up I was gonna move back to Phoenix, and
Come back to
it
Phoenix.
was like the coolest place ever, and I did. But then I discovered Tucson, and wow,
A lot
you
more
can
your
see
speed.
you can, yeah, I like Tucson. I tell people I tell people I have Goldilocks syndrome. This is a thing that I don't know if anybody else says that or if I coined it myself. I like to think that I coined it myself.
What
But
is it?
basically, like I'm always like I always want everything just right. Like I don't want it too big, I don't want it too small, I don't want it
Mm,
too hot, I don't want it too cold, I don't want it
right.
you know, I want it just right, like
Yeah.
Goldilocks, you know?
Gotcha.
And like Tucson is like the perfect Goldilocks scenario for me because it's big enough to where it's got stuff happening and it's exciting,
Hmm.
like some of the
Hmm.
bigger places that I've lived and I've spent time in. Um, like Denver and Phoenix. And
Right.
after my accident, I spent a lot of time out in Philadelphia because I went to the Shriners Hospital out there. And so like these big cities, but then it's got the heart and like the kind of feel of like those smaller towns that I also grew up in and love, like Oshkosh and all these the small knit, tight knit communities that
Hmm.
I knew how much we're kind of like vital. Like I said, when I was a kid in Alaska, those small knit, you know, those friends that were only like there was only 100 people around in those 20 miles circles. Well, it was really important that they all got along and worked together because, like I said, you clear your property, then I'll help you, you know, and we can help build each other's houses. We can help build up these towns and stuff like that. And so
Yeah.
that's why I love it here. Is it's like it's small enough to where people still care. Like not that people don't care in bigger towns, but it's just a different pace and a different attitude in really big cities than it
Yeah.
is in really small towns. But it's like still big enough to where people aren't all up in your business all the time, like a really small town, but people care. People care here like a small town. And so
Yeah. 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 I agree with that. I mean, being from Boston, which is a major city without a doubt, much like the ones you were naming, everything goes really fast. And from there, I lived in full time elements in this way. I lived in North Carolina, which is my first introduction to really honest space and greenery that shows up differently. And, I wanted to go to Dunkin' Donuts being from Massachusetts. That's what we do. And Dunkin' Donuts is, I mean, any turn, every gas station is a Dunkin' Donuts. And even if there's not a gas station, there's a Dunkin' Donuts anyway. In
right.
North Carolina, I had to ride about 20-24 minutes just to get to Dunks one time. And I was like, wait a minute, that's uncommon. So yeah, I'm introduced to this level of space and Tucson, more spacious than that. And so it grows on you differently for someone who's from Boston and from a big city, wasn't expecting it. And when I remember actually going back home one of the first few times to Massachusetts to visit family, and I felt almost claustrophobic. I was like, oh my gosh, how do people drive on these streets? I became, brown nose and all, like not brown nosing, but like I stuck my nose up slightly Like, how do people
Yeah.
drive on these streets? And it wasn't because I was any less the guy I was. It was just I had so much experience now with some space that I was like, I don't know, I'm not quite sure how I did it. I blame Tucson for that.
Right. Yeah, that's how I felt when I first went out to Philadelphia, because that was my first experience of like the East Coast big cities. Like I'd been in Anchorage, I'd been in Denver, I've been in Phoenix. Like those are all over here though, where you like you said, you have space. When I went out
Yep.
to Philadelphia the first time and I saw row houses and all that for the first time, and I was like, these people don't even have a yard. Like their house is just
Right,
like the
right.
wall, and then like another house, and then another
Yeah.
house. I was like,
Right. Yeah. Colonial style. Yeah.
"Hmm,
Double deckers, triple deckers, as we would say
yeah.
back in the bean. Yeah. Yeah. You so you mentioned an accident a second ago. And I want to talk about that a little bit because as we talk about your journey and your pursuits, I know this because we talked before. I know you also had an interest in medical school at one point in time, or at least becoming a nurse or in this particular space. And so, share with me this journey into the medical perspective, right? This decision you had for you, and then we'll talk about maybe some decisions that had to be made as a result of maybe the accident, and what made you change your path.
Yeah. Well, just a small correction. I have always been interested in performing and all that. Like the first time I was on stage, I was 3.5 years old. But
Nice.
when I was in high school, I like, I'll just be real clear. My dad was never really supportive of my creative pursuits. He was always one of, you need a real job. Like, yeah, that's fun to play around, but you should have a real job. And so when I was in high school, I was thinking, okay, well, I was going to go to school to do massage therapy because I've always enjoyed giving massages. People say like I have magic hands. I'm a
Mm-hmm.
little bit of a healer. I'm also like, I consider myself now, I like, some people don't believe in a lot of this, but I'm an empath, and like I just kind of know, like if somebody's got like a knot in their back or whatever, I can just like, right there is where you're hurting, right? And like kind of, and people are like, oh wow. And that's just always something that I've been gifted in that sense. All right. And so I was on my path to go to be a massage therapist, but I started working very young. I was a waitress my freshman year. As soon as I turned 14, I started waiting tables, and I waited tables until I turned 16. And in Nebraska, you can get your CNA license when you're 16. That's where the nursing comes in. I quit waiting tables and I got my CNA license. I was a nurse's assistant at a nursing home, and that's when I had my accident. Is a few months after I had gotten my CNA license and was certified
Mm.
as a CNA. And through that training, you have to get certified in CPR, and you have to, learn first responder things, and you have to learn all of the stuff in order to get your CNA license. And so then at the time of my accident, I really put a lot of that stuff to use. Okay. And the fact that I was going to school for the massage therapy, that year in high school, I was taking, instead of regular biology, I was taking anatomy and physiology. And it was December. It was right before the end of the, first trimester, because in Nebraska they do trimesters, and so like the 4 quarters they do here. It's a different
Mm-hmm.
system out there. Um,
Gotcha.
but anyway,
I'm familiar with it.
we were we were getting ready for our first finals basically of the year, and I'd been studying for my physiology test that was going to be on Monday morning. And this was the weekend beforehand when I had my accident. And so studying, and in physiology, we were learning the nervous system and the bones and the muscles of the body. Like I had to, like, on a diagram, name all of the 206 bones in the body and all of the muscle systems and how they all worked, and explain how the spinal cord worked, and and all that stuff. Okay, that was what I'd been studying all weekend. And I'm on my way to work at the nursing home. And there was a lot that was going on in my personal life. My growing up was interesting on a lot of different levels.
Sure.
Not only from moving around, but it was a very somewhat tumultuous childhood with my parents not always having the best rapport with one another.
Sure.
It was somewhat of an abusive household at times, to be
Mm,
quite honest. Not towards me, but between my parents. Okay.
sure.
And so dealing with that, having turned 16, I had a friend that had she'd graduated before, she'd gotten an apartment like 2 blocks from the high school. I told my mom that morning, I'm like, hey, I'm moving out. Like I had moved out once when I was 14, because of things going on in the house. And then I came back because my mom, and then yeah, I just told her, I was like, I I want to be in town. We lived 15 miles out in the country, out on dirt
Hmm.
roads. I'm like, I want to be in town so I don't have to, I'm working. And I was very active in school. I was in choir, I was in drama, I was in pep club, I was vice president of the pep club and president of the FCCLA. And like I was, doing stuff always and or working, and so driving, a half an hour out to my house or whatever, or at the end of the night, because I go and work out and do like weightlifting and stuff in the mornings because I was part of powerlifting. And so I do that
Nice.
before school, go to school all day, get off of school, have like 30, 45 minutes to like chill out for whatever till I had to be to work, and then work till 10 o'clock at night, and then drive all the way home and then study. And like that was my life, you know. And so I was just like, if I'm in town, it'll just make life so much easier. And so I told my
Sure.
mom that morning, that I was moving out. I'd also broken up with a guy that was wanting to like get married and settle down and stay in Nebraska for the rest of his life. And I was just not ready for all that at 16. And I already
All
knew
right.
that I didn't want to spend the rest of my life in Western Nebraska. I mean, Western Nebraska is great, but that's not where I wanted to be forever. And I
Sure.
already knew that. I'm like, no, that's not the path that I want to be on. And so I broke up with this boy. I told my mom I'm moving out. Like all this stuff was going on. And I'm on my way to work. And it's Sunday afternoon. And my car was a 76 Torino, Grand Torino. It didn't look real good, but it had a rebuilt engine and it rode real smooth on the dirt roads. And so
Uh-huh.
I was just cruising, singing myself, me and Bobby McGee singing to myself because my radio was broken. My seatbelt was also broken, which ended up saving my life because the night before, after I'd broken up with the guy and all that, is a whole other story. But the night I was on my way home from work and I hit a soft spot in the gravel. I was doing like 45, 50 normal dirt road speeds, kind of fishtail just a little bit, just enough to feel, oh, that's a soft spot in the road right there. When you drive dirt roads every day, you notice those things and you kind of
Sure.
remember those things and where they are. It's just kind of, you deal with
That's
it.
right.
That's part of driving dirt roads all the time. And so I'm on my way to work and I remember that spot that I'd hit the night before coming up, and I looked down and I was doing 110.
My gosh.
And so I took my foot off the gas. I didn't hit the brakes because you don't do that. You don't do that on a dirt road. You hit your brakes and you'll for sure, wreck.
Interesting.
And so you let the car slow down on its own. But I was still doing about 87, 88 miles an hour when I hit that soft spot. And it put me driver's side first into the ditch. And the ditches in where I lived in Western Nebraska, they're irrigated ditches. So that's
Mm.
the way, so that way if there's any rain or anything like
Water,
that,
yeah.
it's off to get to the fields. So the
Really,
ditches are
really quickly, John. I mean, interject. Did you know that that soft patch was coming up when you popped your head up? Because you said it was something you kind of register and remember
yeah,
when you
yeah.
drive
I
those roads. Did
remembered
you?
I remembered it coming up. And so like I looked down and that's when I realized how fast I was going because I was
Gotcha.
just kind of singing and I was kind of thinking about everything that was going on in my life at the
Sure.
time
Sure.
and just kind of singing and driving, and I had no idea that I was like going so fast until I
Sure.
remembered that spot coming up and I looked down and I was like, "Oh."
Yeah.
And
Got it.
I
Okay.
like I took my foot off the gas, but yeah, I was still going like 87 when I hit it. And it took me, and those ditches are like 3, 4 feet deep, 3.5 foot deep is usually like their standard. And so it took that, and the Torino's really long. And so it took my front driver's side corner first, and then my car did like cartwheels basically. And
Okay.
front driver's side, rear passenger side, it did that 3 times. And and this is studies from the reports from what the officers and stuff like that did, because I told them the last time I looked down it was between 85 and 90, but I wasn't sure, and they said by measuring the skid marks and all that they determined that I was doing like 87 to 88, and they're the ones that said by like the dents of the car and the impacts in the wheat field that I landed on, that's how they told me like the trajectory of what had happened. Okay,
Sure.
because
Sure.
it was all so fast that it's not like I knew what was happening, that we were doing cartwheels and all that. Like I
Right.
didn't.
Right. Right.
I closed my eyes, gritted my teeth, and I remember I opened my eyes once and I saw like the back seat and sky and ground, and like that's what I remember of it. But I was conscious. I was like it all happened really fast. There's just like the split, like there's a little bit that I don't remember, but I didn't have any concussions. I didn't have any kind of head injuries at all, other than some road rash on my cheek. Um, I was hardly hurt, considering the fact that I was thrown from my car, and but I broke my back when I hit the ground. I broke 4 ribs and 1 vertebrae in my back. I broke T12, which in the spinal, it has 6 cervical, then 12 thoracic, and 5 lumbar, and then your sacrum and your coccyx, your tailbone. So I'm like down lower mid back is where I broke it, because when your body's falling, you naturally kind of ball up. And so that balled up point, that like that kind of 1 vertebrae that kind of sticks out when you kind of curve your back, that's what took the full force and full impact of my fall.
Mm-hmm.
And it just kind of T11 wasn't cracked, wasn't hurt. L1 wasn't cracked, wasn't hurt. But T12 basically exploded into my spinal cord.
Wow.
And when I was laying there, that's when the nurse training and the knowledge of the muscles and the bones and the nervous system that I'd been studying all week came into play. Because as I was laying there at first, when the noise stopped and I opened my eyes and there's this tire is spinning above my head, I was really close to the car smashing me. It landed on my right shoulder, and I was kind of pinned under my right arm, and my right shoulder was pinned under the car. But like it was, so that's like how close it was to smashing my head and
Wow.
me being dead.
Jeez.
So everything's, the noise stopped. I opened my eyes, the tire's still spinning above my head, and I'm just like, and I felt like I was on fire. I felt like my legs were on fire. Like I thought there was flames, and I looked to see if there was fire, and there wasn't any flames anywhere, but I couldn't move my legs. And I knew right away what was happening. I knew right away that I'd broken my back and I'd severed my spinal cord.
Mm.
I knew instantly. And so then that's when the nurses training came into play. And you're taught as a first responder, like how you're supposed to talk to somebody to kind of keep them from going into shock.
Mm-hmm.
And so I started talking to myself as a first responder. I was talking to myself in third person, like, okay, John Lee, you have broken your back, you severed your spinal cord, you're going into shock. You need to remain calm as possible. Let's take a deep breath. And so I try to take a deep breath, and the car is on me, and I'm like, okay, but I can't breathe. So now what? The first thing they do when they tell you, if somebody has broken their back or broken their neck, don't
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 move.
move them.
Right.
That's the first thing they teach you. But I'm trying to remain calm, and this car is on top of me. And so I'm like, okay. And I get kind of shoveled, because luckily the wheat field that I landed in had just been tilled, so the soil was soft. It had been worked recently. So I was able to kind of like, the ground was soft enough, so I was able to kind of like shimmy out from underneath the car, but then I was still like pinned up against it, and I still when I tried to take a deep breath just to kind of calm down, like I felt like I couldn't get that breath that like I really needed. And so I'm like, at this point, I'm still 7 miles out in the country. The closest house is a mile and a half away. This is a Sunday afternoon in Nebraska. It's December 6th. There's just not a lot of traffic on a dirt road and
Yeah.
on a Sunday in Nebraska. Okay, there's just not. So I'm like, okay, I don't know how long it's going to be till somebody finds me. This is 1998. I did not have a cell phone. Like there's people that had cell phones, but I was not one of them. Um, and so I made the decision, like, I'm like, I got to get away from this car. Like, I can't breathe. I don't know if I'm going to end up, like, I'm talking to myself out loud. I'm like, I don't know. I could end up with a collapsed lung or something. And I know some of it was just probably fear and panic and all that, but also like, I felt like I couldn't breathe. And this is an important aspect of me just being able to relax a little bit. So I grabbed a hold of the back of my right leg behind my knee. I grabbed a hold of my pant leg. I had nurse's scrubs on because I was on my way to work, so they're baggy and all that. And so I grabbed a hold of my pant leg behind my knee and I rolled over onto my stomach, which I probably did more damage to my back. But with everything that was going on, like, who, I don't know.
It
But
may be a
some
life
doctors
saving
said
decision.
told me that no, like the damage had already been done. I didn't really
Mhm.
hurt it that much because I did like a really kind of like they do teach you how to roll people and how to move people as like stiffly as you can. And so I tried to do that as I was rolling myself over, but after I was rolled over, I could breathe. I was able to relax a little bit. I was able to keep myself calm until somebody came. And it was about an
Oh,
hour.
let me. Okay, so you've referenced this mindset of being calm multiple times, and I appreciate that because that is something that I think anytime you're in a situation that's bringing you stress, regardless of the level, that's something we tend to tell ourselves. But the story you just shared, your accident, it's a whole different ball game. I mean, it's not even the same conference to use a sport analogy. But you deliver it so simply. Just had to remain calm, Jonni. Your T12 is shattered. Your spine has been severed. Was it? I mean, the obvious question is, was it that simple for you? I mean, you've lived this 16 years one way, and then you're like, that's it. Was it that simple, or no?
I was able to keep myself calm and keep I'm sorry to say this, but my shit together until somebody got there. And then once the first people got there, who happened to be a friend of mine who was a year ahead of me in school, and his girlfriend who was a year behind me in school, is who found me first.
They just
And
happen to be driving by.
yeah, they just happened to be
Wow.
driving by. They were on their way. They were taking the back road to Chapel to wherever. Because I mean, you could either take the highway or you could take the dirt roads or whatever. And they were just
Wow.
happened to they wanted to take the back road that day just for fun and to enjoy the view. And I started throwing dirt. I was crying. I was screaming. I was totally freaking out.
At
I
that
was
point.
able, yeah, that's when it was like I kept myself as calm as I could, like while I was alone. And I don't know where that came from. And like, yeah, it sounds like it real easy, but like, I don't, I mean, I was having to talk to myself like the whole
Sure.
time and just like,
Right.
breathe, breathe, breathe. This is okay. You're okay. This is okay. Just try to stay calm. Just stay calm. Just stay calm. Just stay calm. And then Christine and Jimmy show up, and I'm like, oh, I broke my back. I can't get up. I said, I want to get up, Christine, and I can't get up. I said, I broke my fucking back, Christine. And I just want to move my legs, and I can't move my legs. And I've lost my shit. So
Sure.
sorry for the.
No, 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 no. I got you. And I can imagine Christine and Jimmy were probably. I mean, they weren't expecting to see Jonni on the side of the road.
Yeah,
Period. Never mind with. I mean, not even with a broken down car. Forget about a destroyed car and a broken back.
yeah.
And they just happen to be cruising by. Now, did you have a? I mean, did you have a notion that I know Chapel's coming up and somebody may or may not come by this way, or were you at any
No,
point in
I
time in the
mean, I was
mind that
closer to Oshkosh than Chapel. I lived like because Chapel and Oshkosh are about 30 miles apart, and I live
Okay.
50 miles, and I was headed towards Oshkosh. So,
Okay.
yeah, and Jimmy and Christine, they didn't have a cell phone either. Christine stayed with me while Jimmy went to go find a neighbor with a phone to call
Gotcha.
911. And then it happened that a little while later, a woman who happened to be a farmer's wife came along, and she had a bag phone, because the farmers, they all had they
Uh-huh.
had, they had the bag phones and all that. And so she's the one that called, and she called even before talking to Christine or talking to me. She just seen my car, seen Christine landing there. And so when she called, she thought that, she reported that there was more than one person in the accident, like that she saw. Like, I had like this blanket that had been in my car. Like, she had said that she thought there was 3 people. And so when the ambulance first showed up, there was like, who's all involved? Who's always with you? And I'm like, nobody. I was by myself. There wasn't anybody else involved. And so like they had sent 2 ambulances,
Yeah.
because
Yeah. Yeah.
like the farmer, she just came up and seen the wreck and called, you know. And but yeah, I was by myself. And then the EMT people, who were people that the nursing home that I worked at is at the other wing of the hospital. Like in
Sure.
Oshkosh, the hospital and the nursing home were in the same building, just
Okay.
separated, you know.
Yeah.
Um, and so like these are people that I know and I kind of work with, they see me all the time. The director of nursing was the director for the hospital and the nursing home. And but anyway, they were picking me up, and I telling them, I think I broke my back in the lower thoracic, and they're like, it's okay, we'll get it figured out. We got to get you in, get you checked out. And I just kept telling them, I broke my back in the lower thoracic, and I get
Yeah.
into the emergency room, and it was an ER doctor who was he hadn't been there a lot, and I'd never met him before. And so he didn't really realize that I worked at the nurse, any of my background or whatever. But then I told him, I'm like, I broke my back, I think in the lower thoracic. And it's like, how do you even know that word?
Yeah.
I'm
Right.
like,
Right.
I have a physiology test tomorrow. And he's like, well, I think you probably would pass it, but you're not going to be taking that physiology test tomorrow, honey. You're
Right.
not going to be
Right.
going back to school for a while, because yeah, you have broken your back, and the whole thing, you know.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah.
So, okay. I want to ask one more question here. Then I want to pivot. Actually, a nice little segue off of what you just said about school. But before I get there, for my listeners, as I mentioned before, Jonni and I are friends, and we chatted offline a little bit about this in our last when I was on your Jonni's particular podcast piece, and Jonni gave the green light to kind of share this story. But I want to make sure people know that you should never go up to somebody and ask them what's your story, what's your experience about any of their identities, just off the cuff. So I want to make it very clear to people that Jonni and I had discussed this a little bit beforehand. Jonni was going to share her story with that. In that, Jonni, to double back off that and then transition to a different question, is it sharing that story now, all these years later, decade plus, couple decades, all these years later, is it difficult? Is it difficult to share? Has it ever been difficult to share? And I don't necessarily mean from the perspective of, I'm tired of people continuously asking me. I mean emotionally, when you were conscious the entire time. So as you're relaying it back to me, I have to imagine you're watching it happen again. Is it difficult to share? Is it challenging? What are your thoughts? How do you feel about sharing this story whenever you find yourself doing so?
Yeah, it's a story that I have shared many times. And
Sure.
and yeah, just to touch on what you have said, it's there are people that are willing to share their story and very open about their story, such as myself. There are
Sure.
other people who are not as open about it. They don't like to talk about it, because yes, it is a reliving of that. For
That's right.
me, for me, it's always been kind of helpful. And for me, I would rather people just ask if they're wondering, or whatever, or I'll just tell them, just to. And that's something that I'm hoping with my organization and stuff, just representation of people. That's the
Of course.
problem, is people oftentimes, when I come across them, the ones that are just like, oh wow, it's because I could be the first person in a wheelchair that they've ever met. I've had
Yeah.
that happen a lot. And then
Sure.
and and I'm an outgoing person. I'm mostly extroverted, especially when I'm out like for karaoke or something like that that I enjoy to do. Like I'm there to have fun, and I usually kind of bring a party even if it's only in my head. I'm there to have fun, and I
Sure.
like I like to shoot pool, I like to dance, I like to mingle, I like to do all these things. And a lot of times people are very surprised by that because they don't expect somebody in a wheelchair to do
That's right.
anything really
Correct.
in society. Like people with disabilities are really just thought that they just, I don't know what people expect of me. I know that a lot of times though, just from their reaction and their is they don't expect me to be how I am.
That's
And
right.
I've always been this way. And that's one thing that being in that small niche community of Oshkosh at the time of my accident was really amazing for me
Mhm.
as far as the support network for my family, the support network of my school. Like, I mean, some of it I felt was kind of fakish because, like, I was never like one of like the popular kids, you know what I mean? But then, kind of
Mm.
after my accident, I kind of was there for a little while. But it was also like, but people cared, you know what I mean? I didn't feel that it was fake, although part of me was like, this is kind of weird that like this person was never talking to me last year, and
Right. Right.
now they're here trying to help me. But I didn't feel like they were being fake, you know what I mean? When I talk about these people, because um I don't, you know what I mean? Like it was weird at first. It was definitely weird at first coming from that. I'd always kind of been the outcast. I was always the new kid. And even
Sure.
though I'd been in Oshkosh for a few years, and Oshkosh is the town that like my great grandparents like helped found. Okay. My dad
Mm.
graduated Garden County High School. My aunts and uncles graduated Garden County High School. My aunt was still the secretary of the high school when I went to school. I had cousins in school with me, but I was the new kid. I was the weirdo from Alaska and that had lived all over the place and was like in this little podunk town that I thought like everybody was stupid because it was so like 20 years behind everything else. And I'm like,
Right.
and so I never, like, I was always part of like the outcast crowd in school, not that I didn't mingle with everybody because I'm a mingler. I can have friends. I had friends that were jocks. I had friends that were preppy. I had friends that were, but not really like my really close friends. They were all like the misfit geeks that everybody picked on, like me.
Mm. 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 Mm.
Like that was
Yeah.
my niche. And then after my accident, then everybody cared, and everybody cared,
Right.
and
Right. Interesting. Right. Right.
and it was, and at first I thought it was fake, like at first. Looking back now, like I can see the genuine care that they really did. Like it just kind of, it shook them to their core, but then it wasn't, and then after my accident though, my oldest son is named after a very close friend of mine that not even a year after my car wreck was in a car wreck. um Himself and three other kids from our high school, and he was
Mhm.
killed. The other
Mm.
three survived, not without injuries. None of them were paralyzed, but the one girl did get some severe concussions and had, migraines and had other issues from that. The one kid's feet were severely burned, and he had to have skin grafts and stuff like that on
Wow.
his feet.
Wow.
Like, so they were all came out able-bodied, but still, like, it's not like they unscathed, you know what I mean?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and Jasper was killed instantly, and that's who my oldest son is named after. And then it was after that that like people really, I don't know, it was a different, not only could I connect with the kids from the accident, that the survivors, and I became closer with them, but then just everybody in the school, not only were they rocked, you know what I mean, like they got rocked, and then you know and it was just the shock of like your life can change in an instant is what they got with me. And then a year later, they got the lesson of not only can it change, but it can end in an instant.
That's right.
And so it gave the kids in my high school, I'm going to get all gushy a little bit. I'm a gushy type person, a different perspective, I think.
Sure. Sure.
And I think
you want to pause, Jonni?
Oh, sorry. No, it's okay. I just
No, it's okay.
I'll talk through it because like I said, I'm a gusher and I just want to be real.
You sure?
Looking back, I don't see it as being as fake as what I initially had felt that they were being.
Mhm.
It's just they were trying to process it too, of like the shock of the change and then the shock of the loss. And even like even through me though, and through an injury, like they teach you, like you go through like the stages of grief, you know, like the 6 stages of grief. Was it
Sure.
six? I think it's six.
It always
Anyway,
changes to 7. I saw 10
yeah,
one
I
point in
don't know.
time.
It was
Yeah.
5, 6, 7, however many stages of grief. Like you go through that, even like in my accident, you know what I mean? You go through those, like the grief of the loss of my legs, you know what I mean? To
Yeah.
where,
Yeah.
you know, like that denial phase and that angry
Yeah.
phase and
Yeah.
that,
Right.
you know, and then that acceptance phase and all that. Like no matter what trauma, I guess, people deal with in life, they have to, you know, you kind of have to go through those stages to learn from it, to work past it. And even when you're a bystander, you know, but like I said, I mean, it was my school, my whole high school had 250 kids in it. You know, my graduating class, well, we started out with 22 and we had 19 when we graduated. You know what I mean? But we were the
Yeah.
smallest school in the class, but like that's small, like that's tight knit. Like there's everybody knows everybody. You know,
Yeah.
whether you're friends with everybody or not, it doesn't mean you don't know them. And
That's right.
so those people that may not weren't necessarily my friends, like they still knew me. Like they still
Yeah.
knew me close enough to where they cared about me. They didn't want what happened to me to happen to me. And so them trying to help me afterwards wasn't fake as sometimes I maybe thought it was at first. Because
Sure.
I did.
Sure.
I definitely did at first. Like I talked some crap about a few people at first.
No, I get
And
it. I mean, if
you
if
know,
folks
because I
weren't
was like,
there
why are they
beforehand, yeah.
want to be my friend now when like last
Right.
year, you know, I mean, because I also growing up and I'm out, I've been out very long time. I'm pansexual. When I was younger, that wasn't a word. I was
Right.
out as bisexual, you know, in the
Right.
90s, that's what it was.
Yep.
But being out as bisexual when you're 15 in a small western Nebraska town, wasn't real fun. I had dead
No.
animals thrown on my car. I was called a dyke. I was called all kinds of things all the time.
Everything.
And then this next year, I wrecked my car, and then everybody wants to be my friend.
Right.
When like
Right.
just two
Yeah.
years ago, you're calling me a dyke and putting dead squirrels on my car.
Right.
Okay,
Right. Right.
you know,
Right.
but
Right.
it
Right.
was that is though, but they do care. You know what I mean? Like it was just now like as onlookers, you know, of that shift of like it just brought it home though. Like it could happen to anybody. You know,
Yes.
anything can happen at any point in time. Nobody is promised anything in life. Um, I am one that I do believe things happen for a reason.
Yeah.
Um, and I do feel that I'm in my chair for a reason.
Mhm.
I do know that, like, not to say that it's always easy for me. And I know a lot of times people think that I always have this, like, oh, sunshine type of, oh, everything is great because they see me in public. But I deal with a lot of depression. I deal with a
Sure.
lot of anxiety. I deal with a lot of frustration just because the world is not equipped or very accepting of people within the disabled community, such as myself. And there's just been a lot of pushback that I've gotten just because I'm in a chair, whether it's, you know, with housing, with doctors, with jobs, with everything, you know,
Mhm.
you know, it affects every piece of my life all
Yes.
the time, every day. But I try not to be bitter about things. Like that's the
Sure.
thing that I tell people. They're like, "Oh, well, how can you? I don't know if I'd have such a positive outlook." It's like, well, I don't really. I mean, you're so listen to what you're saying, and then think about the alternative that you're giving.
Mhm.
Like, I try to be as positive as I can, and try to, you know, overcome and adapt and all the things that I can because what other choice do I have? The other choice is sit and be miserable, and like I probably would off myself a long time ago. Like that is not an option. Like let's not go there. You know what I mean?
Mm.
Like why is it that society just thinks, "Oh, well, I'm not going to expect anything of you now." Or really, you know, like even though like ADA laws have been around for since the 70s, which isn't real long ago, but it's like there's still so much stuff that gets grandfathered in that gets, it's just, it's frustrating. And so that's where I get angry sometimes. But I also feel that I'm in this chair for a reason, because a lot of people, they're not going to be as boisterous about things as I will.
Mm-hmm.
I
Mm-hmm.
was raised to stand up and speak out, and to speak up for other people that won't speak up for themselves. And, sometimes that means that people aren't going to like what you have to say, but it takes somebody to say something in order to create change.
That's right. That's right.
And no matter what you're working towards, no matter what it is, like it has to be voiced in order for anything to ever come of it. And so when I talk to apartment complexes about their, what they call accessible, when I'm looking for housing, because I've moved around a lot because of housing issues, and what they consider accessible, and then I still can't even get my chair through a bathroom door or
That's right.
whatever, because I mean, here in Arizona, almost anything that's garden level is considered wheelchair accessible. Well, just
Mm.
because I can get to the front door without a step does not mean that the inside of
That's right.
this place
Correct.
is suitable for me to be able to function within.
That's right. Yep. Yeah. Let me jump in really fast, Johnny.
Sorry.
No. I everything you said was going to be a part of the next question anyway, and so I wanted to get a little bit more out of it, and I was trying to figure out which one to jump into. Um, Thank you for all of that. First and foremost, I mean that was really profound, and um, I think you had a lot of information there that's going to be valuable for some people who may have had questions prior to hearing you speak. That you speak your truth there. I wanted to ask you. I have a couple questions here I want to ask, but I'm going off of what you just shared. Let's go with and I can infer some of this from what you just said, but I want you to put it into your own words, and you can repeat some stuff or go in a different direction. First off, inclusion. A lot of people don't really know that term, and practice academically comes out of the disability community, out of disability studies. Inclusion around things like universal design, um, critically examining what you just named. Just because I have access to the front door doesn't mean I have access to the bathroom or some things that are inside the building. So inclusion has a strong space within the disability community because that's really where it's birthed out of, at least on paper. So my question to you, Jonni, is prior to your accident, pre-accident, post-accident, how has your understanding of diversity and inclusion and equity changed since your accident versus maybe where you were with it before the accident? And the reason why I say you can repeat stuff is comments like not being able to get into a bathroom might not have been on top of your mind pre-accident, but it's there post-accident. So how has your understanding of diversity, equity, and inclusion changed, or how has the accident impacted that since the accident?
Yeah, well, I mean, definitely when you have to deal with something firsthand, changes your perspective.
Changes things, right?
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, but okay, I want to backtrack just a little bit and tell
Of
you a
course.
little bit of an interesting whatever. I've already said, like, I have some gifts, okay, that I believe in. And when I was younger, one of my uncles, okay, I had lots of aunts and uncles. Like I said, I grew up with hippies, all right? These people were actually my aunts and uncles, but all right. But my uncle Den, he had been in a motorcycle accident in the 70s. And he used a wheelchair a lot of times. He was able to walk with crutches, but a lot of times he used his chair. All right. And he lived in Mitchell, Nebraska, which is in between Scottsbluff and all that. And that's kind of where I lived. And so when we lived out there from third grade, fourth grade, fifth grade, that time frame, we were around my Uncle Den. My dad built a ramp on our trailer so that way Dan could come over. My Uncle Dan and Aunt Doe could come over and visit, give him someplace other to go than his own house. And like my dad was Very, like, yeah, man, you want to come over? I can't have you come over. We don't have a ramp. And my dad can build anything. Okay. My dad is a construction man. He's a welder. He's like you need something built, he can build it. All
Got
right.
you. Yeah.
So, he's like, oh, build a ramp. And so he built a deck and a ramp onto our trailer so Den could come over. And so that gave me a little bit of a knowledge. Okay. That was my firsthand knowledge we had other, I'd known other people in wheelchairs and stuff like that too when I was growing up, even in Alaska. A real close friend of ours, Cindy, she had MS and stuff, but like she would have like she had sled dogs for her, and she'd have them pulling her wheelchair, and she had them trained just like knee and high and hut and all that. Like they train, the sled dogs, she had them for her wheelchair. And so
Sure.
like
Yeah.
I knew that growing up, and I knew a, a man with cerebral palsy who was in a power chair that my grandma helped a lot growing up. And so
Mm.
like I'd been around disabled community, and like I volunteered with my grandma, to like I did like bingo calls, and I read to people and stuff like that, and spend time with the elderly at different stuffs. And one place that my grandma helped out a lot was called Cambridge Court, and it was for elderly who had developmental disabilities. And
Yeah.
so, and that's where I learned a lot about people there as well. But going back to Uncle Den and the fact that he could use crutches sometimes, and so then sometimes when we, especially around his own house, like he used his crutches, or he'd be in his other chair that he just would sit in, and his
Yeah.
wheelchair would just kind of be there. And I'd always hop in it and like kind of go around the house and up and down the ramp and all around, just to kind of feel what it was like, kind of play a little bit. But also he brought it to my attention one time because he was having like, it was like a Memorial Day something. It was like a big get together. All right. And I wasn't going to be the only kid around. I have older siblings, but my siblings are a lot older than me. So a lot of times I was the only kid. Um, but this was a day that there was going to be other kids around. And so he had his wheelchair put up, and I was like, Uncle Dan, where's your chair? And he's like, oh, I have it put up today because I don't want all the kids playing on it. And he's like, because he's like, it's not a toy. And I'm like, I know it's not a toy. I said, I'm not playing with it. I'm practicing.
That's what you said.
That's what I said at
Wow.
9.5 years old. I said, I think I'm going to be in one day, and I want to practice. I need to know what this is like. And Mitchell is 9 miles outside of Scottsbluff. Okay. And Scottsbluff is where I was Flight for Life too. And that's where I spent the first month after my accident, is up at Regional West in Scottsbluff, Nebraska. And my Uncle Den still lived in Mitchell at the time. And he came and saw me after I got out of ICU. And when I was just in my regular hospital room. And he came to visit me, and he's like, do you remember telling me that you thought you were going to be in a wheelchair someday? I said, yep. He goes,
Wow.
so I guess you really were practicing, huh? It's like, I guess. I was like,
Wow, Jonni.
so
Jeez.
I don't know. Like, and I do feel that I am boisterous about things. I have stood up for things. I've gone in front of city council. I served on student council at both of the colleges that I went to, WNCC in Scottsbluff and Front Range Community College in Westminster, Colorado. I served on the student government and made both of those campuses more accessible. Made sure
Nice.
that like helped get, like in Scottsbluff, I helped get like the buttons outside the bathroom door, so that way, like you
Nice.
have
Yeah,
buttons
yeah.
to open the front door, but like so you got to go to the bathroom too, you know what I
Right.
mean? Like there should be buttons outside the bathroom door. There should be, there was a lot of things that I helped get accomplished at the campuses that I went to, and even in Scottsbluff, I took it to the city council meeting one night. Just the fact that like I couldn't even go down, like there's blocks in Scottsbluff that it's like you get up, there's a curb cut out here, and the blocks out there are long sometimes. Okay, like so
Yeah.
you go
Yeah.
like all the way down here, and then there's no curb cut out on the other end. So then I gotta like either go all the way back down and around and get in the street, or I gotta like precariously, because I'm a chicken. I don't like going off of curbs and stuff like that if I'm by myself.
I'll blame you.
And you know, and so it was like these are things that I've brought to attention. Um, and so yeah, I mean, if my purpose is to kind of help make the world a little bit more accessible and help shed a light on the fact that just because somebody's disabled doesn't mean that they're just going to sit around and not have a life, I'm all for it. Like that's what I'm here for, and I feel that in the pit of my soul that like
Sure.
this happened for a reason, and that I am a voice, and I might not always be the best voice because I might not always word things the best or whatever, but at least it's a voice that I don't feel there's been a loud enough one out there yet. And I
Sure.
don't have a problem getting loud.
Good for
So
you. Yeah, good
here
for
we
you,
go.
Jonni. Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Um thank you for sharing those things. And that story about being 9 and your uncle's chair, sort of prophetic.
Yeah.
I
And
mean,
so
it's
it has changed my perspective. That was your, you know, and my approach, but it's just made me stronger and more boisterous.
that's right.
You
You
know,
always
it
had
kind
it. It
of
was
like
always there.
once I had to face it myself, and then it's in my face. Like you can't, like I said, I can't get away from it. So then
That's
it's
right. Yeah.
blatantly obvious, like how many problems there are. And so, yeah,
Yeah. Got you. Yeah. And as Black folks, right? Able-bodied Black folks, and just Black folks in general, but coming from an able-bodied perspective. To your point of like once you live it, you see how obvious things are. One of the critical perspectives Black folks take amongst each other, but also communities in general, is you're biologically Black, and then you're also psychologically Black. And to your point, it's when you become psychologically Black that you become aware of like racial injustices, systematic issues, some of these things that you glanced over before because maybe you had the perspective that everybody's equal and we're all one, even socially. It's not until psychologically you shift your understanding and become conscious, is the word you may have heard and we tend to use, that kind of changes things. I got a couple more questions for you, Jonni, if I may. I don't want to hold you up, and this has been
you're
great,
fine.
but I've got a couple more questions for you. Um, you talked about uh, making things more inclusive. A piece of that is also language, especially within marginalized communities. Your organization is called Differently Abled Entertainment. So my question to you is, why differently abled and not disabled, for example, or disability leading that particular piece? Why differently abled, and what was your thought process around choosing that language in particular?
Okay, I'm glad that you brought that up because I've gotten, I want to start with the fact that I have gotten backlash about
Okay.
the choice of that name because there are some slurs that some people consider it a slur when you're talking about the disabled community. Which I also want to have it known that I did not know that when I chose the name.
Sure.
I wasn't like blatantly trying to rock the boat. It just kind of happened. And I didn't realize that I was going to offend some people. And that was never my intent by choosing
Sure.
the name Differently Able. My thought process behind it is the fact that it doesn't matter if you're able bodied or disabled, or you have a seen disability or an unseen disability, or whatever your background may be, wherever you're coming from in life. We are all people and we all approach life differently. Like I am still able to do, I would say 90% of the things that I did before my accident. I just have to do them differently. you
Mm-hmm.
know there's very few things that I can, and even those things that I'm like, well, I can't. Well, there's ways that actually, I mean, I could, like, I mean, I miss, okay, I miss the feeling of squishing mud between my toes, but I mean, I'm still able to stick my foot in the ground and push my toes in the mud if I so choose, although it doesn't have that same sensation,
Mm-hmm.
that that feeling of the oosh that I like, the gooshy. Okay. So like that's what I'm saying. Like there's still, but like, and I'm not like, we were really big hiking growing up in Alaska and Colorado and Montana and all these places that have, hiking. All right. I grew up climbing mountains. And so now like I can't climb a mountain, but I still like I have mountain bike tires on my chair because I like to go, like, I mean, I have kids, we go to the park, there's lots of rocks. I do other little off trail stuff that like as hikey as I can get, I guess.
Sure. Sure.
Within a certain, grade scale and all that of an incline. I try to do as much of that still as I can. It's not the same as when I was younger and I climbed Camelback Mountain and sitting up on top of Camelback Mountain and checking out all of the city. Like I can't do that, but I can go out and enjoy nature and find a little trail that's accessible. There's not a whole lot out there, but there's a few.
Sure.
And so like that's the thing is I have to approach life differently. But I
Right.
mean, even you, as an able bodied person, are going to approach life differently.
Yeah.
And another able bodied person is going to approach life differently.
That's right.
And that's the thing. And that's the message that I'm trying to get across is that
Got it.
everyone is differently able. And our whole thing is, yeah, we want more inclusion and we want proper representation because within, the disabled community, the make up 26% of the adults in America.
Sure.
All right. But yet we're only represented in film and TV 1 to 2% of the time, as far as the disabled community and like stuff like that. All right. But then you take that 1 to 2% of the time that we are represented, and 95% of those roles go to able bodied actors.
Able-bodied people. Yeah, about to say. Yeah.
So that where I'm trying to, somebody doesn't have to have a disability to get involved in my organization, because I do believe that we're all differently able. However, I just want to start seeing the film industry, TV industry, all of it start including people. Like if
That's
you
right.
got a, like just because I'm in a wheelchair, do I necessarily have to play a person in a hospital bed or have to be like
Right.
the
Right.
or whatever? Why
That's right.
can't I not be the CEO of a badass company? Or why can't I not be like a serial killer in some movie? Or why can't I be,
That's
why
right.
is it that these people like why do we have to only play like what they're considered disabled people have like
And
no
and
disabled
like
people
in a position that's oftentimes, to use the term, pitiable, right? That is presented
exactly
as in, we need to find some sort of sorrow for this individual. Yeah.
exactly
Right.
it's either yeah you're supposed to either pity them or be inspired by them.
Right.
And that's the
Right.
only
Yeah.
role
Right.
disabled people.
Yeah.
And there's either, oh, I'm meant to inspire or I'm meant to be pitied. Why can't I just be meant to be a person like the mom on a sitcom that who cares that she's just in a wheelchair, but
Right.
she's like the mom in a sitcom,
That's it.
that
That's it.
happens to be in a wheelchair. Like
Right.
those are the things that I want to see. It's not just being represented like, okay, if they're doing a story that has to do with somebody that's in a wheelchair, then I want somebody in a wheelchair to play them. Yes. But I want to take it that next step
That's right.
and be okay, well, we're writing a movie about a bank robber. Let's say that the bank robber is in a wheelchair or is an amputee or is something. Like,
Right.
why? Like, why not? Like, why not shift it up
Yes.
a little bit,
Yeah.
to
Why? Yeah.
be in this
Why is that not part of the convo? Like, why in the boardroom when we have these pitch these ideas, why is that tossed out as is people, are people seeing it as unrealistic, as improbable? I mean, why? Piece of the question is, why is that the thinking? You know what I mean? Why are
yeah,
we even
exactly.
considering
And I
that
mean,
way?
a lot of it is the thinking is because that's all that people have seen. Like they haven't had a
That's right.
chance
Yeah.
to represent. And like I said, like when I go out and I'm the first person that somebody's met in a wheelchair and they're surprised by the fact that I know how to shoot pool and that I play karaoke and that I have kids and that I've done businesses and that I do the things that I do, they're just like,
What? Tell me more.
so,
Yeah. Right. Right.
and I'm not the only woman in a wheelchair that has kids. So why
Right.
is it so shocking to where why can somebody that's in a wheelchair or whatever play a sitcom mom? But
That's
have
right.
you seen it done yet?
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. And it's not just on television, right? We know this is true in comic books. I mean, they're in fantasy. I mean, there's been a lot of fight for that. I mean, I was a big Batman fan. I can only think of one person in that entire universe who shows up in a wheelchair, and that is Oracle, who was at one point in time Batgirl. And she plays a prominent role in his life. But I'm talking the Batman universe and the DC universe. Now, there's others out there. I mean, Professor X, of course, we know from X Men. That's a whole different universe. He's a really prominent character. But your point, right?
Stan Lee was
I
amazing. Sorry to interrupt there, but Stan
yeah,
Lee and
yeah.
Marvel were really Stan Lee was
They were
different.
always ahead of the curve
He was ahead of the curve as far as
across the
inclusion
board.
of
That's right.
people with disabilities and seeing people like everybody had a superpower to Stan Lee. You know what I mean? Like
Well,
whether you were disabled or not. Like, and
yeah.
that's so.
Well, his whole take on X Men is really a reflection of the world in a different way,
Mhm,
right? Race riots,
mhm,
feminism. I mean, the whole nine is there. So
mhm.
there's no surprise there, right? You name me Stan Lee. But my point with that is, and I did this on a talk years ago with a good colleague of mine, Dr. Drea Latamendi, who was also on the chopping block several seasons back. Right, this notion that if there's anywhere in the world where you should be able to step away from reality a little bit, it's fantasy.
Mm.
But what we come to find really quickly is that the reality of fantasy, and I have a talk on this, the reality of fantasy is that fantasy is reality. That because you're in a wheelchair, even in this fantasy, you know, you have to appropriately be in a wheelchair in this way. And because I'm black, even in this fantasy, I have to be from the projects, or my past has to be riddled with drugs or violence. Even in fantasy, the one place that we should escape that. And so, yes, kudos to Stan Lee for sure. But we just wish it was even more widely represented,
Exactly.
which takes me to my second to last question for you, Jonni. Um, Differently able entertainment, your mission or purpose. I found this on the website. It doesn't say mission explicitly, but it reads as one that says differently abled entertainment strives to place differently abled people in the
Oh
forefront
yeah,
of the entertainment industry by providing them a platform to showcase their talents.
yeah. You were on the mock-up, not correct version of our website, the old one that didn't
Oh,
have our mission. That
that
was
one's live, just so you know.
yeah, it needs I've
Okay.
been trying to, but yeah, if
Okay.
you go yeah, our mission is to promote and encourage differently abled artists in the entertainment industry by producing content featuring their talents. That's technically our
Okay.
statement.
You all heard it first. Okay, so let's go with that statement there. Thank you, Jonni. And let's get that other one. We got to get that off there. But we have your state. We have your mission here. So in that, my question to you is: talk to us about the type of entertainment. You mentioned the importance of representation. Is DAE only focused on in theater, or are you just talk to me about the type of entertainment and what you all strive to accomplish with the organization?
Okay, we are trying to cross the board on everything because within the entertainment industry, especially when it comes to making movies, like you need all of it. You need writers, you need musicians, you need models, you need actors, you need all of the things to make something happen. And so that's what we encompass. Like we interviewed you for our magazine, Seize the Day, and that's also going to be, as you mentioned, a podcast of sorts we're working on. But you know, we have our magazine that's already been established for a while, Seize the Day. And you know, that's where
DAE,
we
of course.
raise awareness for the marginalized causes as well as seen and unseen disabilities through that magazine. And so, but we host photo shoots regularly, and we've helped over 30 aspiring models achieve their first publications in magazines other than our own, because we do publish, you know, pictures of our work in our magazines.
Mhm.
But we try to, our goal is to help build, you know, portfolios, build
Yeah.
resumes, and teach people if they don't know how to build their toolbox, their entertainer's toolbox, as we call it, with the headshots, resume, the all the things that you need in order to present yourself as a package when you're going out to audition for roles or, you know, whatever you're trying to pursue. You kind of have to have that toolbox. And so that's what we're trying to provide people an affordable way to build that toolbox and to showcase it and, you know, build their resumes. And so by being published in different magazines, it looks good on your resume as an actress or as a model, just because if you can be published, then they know that you're marketable, and having been in magazines or whatever, it's a good boost, right? So even if you're an actress and you're not necessarily wanting to model, it can help your career. And then
Yeah.
obviously if you're a model and you're wanting to model, then it's going to help, then that's what you need to be doing anyway, is getting those publications. Because the more publications you have, and then you have a nice resume, and then you can go after an agent, and then you can actually really
That's
be
right.
getting good gigs. All right.
Good.
But you have to have all that ready to present to somebody. An agent isn't just going to pick somebody up off the street, and just because you're a
That's right.
pretty face, that doesn't mean anything. Like,
Mm.
you got to have your headshots, you got to have all that stuff. And that's one of the things that, being from the disabled community, even though, like, okay, as I said, I've been interested in entertainment since I was really little. Okay.
Yeah.
And in seventh grade, I was the only middle schooler cast in the high school play. And every year since seventh grade, or no, I was sixth grade, my bad, sixth grade, every year since sixth grade, every year through high school, even after my accident, like before my accident, I was in a year. And then my senior year, I actually got to be in another play. And then all through college and all that, I was in theatrical plays all the time. And in college, I had a scholarship. I was assistant director of the theater department. I was president of the theater club. I came out of college thinking, all right, I know I'm talented. I mean, yes, I'm not, may not be the best or whatever. I don't ever want to sound like I'm being cocky, but I'm talented and
Sure.
I have a good resume. And so here I am, world. Like, let's get some roles. And they're all like, yeah, but you're in a wheelchair. Yeah, but you need professional headshots, and those are $1,500. Yeah, but this nice dream you have there, little missy, but you don't have what you need in order to achieve it.
Mm.
That's what I found, like, after, when I was really trying to get serious about
Yeah, of
pursuing
course.
it. Was just the fact, all right, when you're disabled, and I was a single mom at the beginning of a lot of things, and um finances are tight, and I had really big opportunities come to me at times, but then it was always, there was something that it needed money. Like, yeah, here's this really big opportunity, but you need those $1,500 headshots that you don't have. And so that's why our photo shoots are $20 a pop. It's so, I want people's dreams to be within their reach. And then
Yes.
also, like, for any of our volunteers, and this is what I always tell everybody, because there's even people that I know what it's like, to where you just don't even have 20 bucks. That doesn't mean
Right.
that you still don't have a dream. That
Yeah, of
still doesn't
course.
mean that you still don't want that opportunity.
Right.
And so for any of our volunteers, or anybody that tells me, like, yeah, I'd really like to do that, but like, I still can't even do the 20 bucks. I'm like, volunteer for us. If you volunteer for us, then you don't have to pay. Like, because you're
That's
helping me and I want to help
right.
you, and need all the
Right.
help we can get, because we're just starting out. And
That's
I
a
mean,
good way
and
to
that's
look at it.
what I want to continue moving forward, is like, that's like our kind of scholarship program. I mean, it doesn't come completely for free. I ask them to, like, we have weekly meetings, and I ask people to, like, share our social media stuff. And it's not like really hard stuff that I'm asking, but it's like, that's what I'm asking. In order, I will let you come to everything for free,
Yeah.
everything for free. And I've had, we have one of our models who, she has been published in multiple magazine. She's got a portfolio of probably well over 200 pictures of all kinds of different looks and different themes and different all that. And she has never paid us not one dime,
Wow.
not one dime. And that's because she helps, she's a volunteer and she works hard, but this is somebody that has developmental issues, you know, and, is, she's one of those people with unseen disability,
Yeah.
like, people look at
Yeah.
her and they think that she's okay, but she's deals with some other things and
Sure.
stuff. And so, I mean, those are the people that I want to help. I mean, but this is a person that is very talented and very, you kind of have to be very clear with them about like, this is how you have to do things, because a lot of people with developmental disabilities, you have to talk to them and approach them differently. But
Sure.
it doesn't mean that she's not capable of still
That's right.
being a vital part of our organization,
That's right.
you know?
That's right.
And so I give her jobs that I know like she enjoys and that she loves, you know, she just loves to be a part of it, but she can't afford, like, she lives on a disabled person's, that's strictly disabled, you know, because there are people that are disabled but yet can still maybe do something on the side. Like, she's not able to do that, you know. And she, because of the housing situation and all that, like, basically, I mean, she don't have nothing at the end of the month. So
Right.
those are the people
Wow.
that, you know, and I know what that's like. I've been there personally, like, to where the one thing standing between me and my dream is some money. Like, okay, and I know, yes, the money makes the world go around and all that, but, you know, like, I just, especially, I mean, people within the disabled community, and not to be like, want, but I mean, God, we already got it hard enough. You know what I mean? Like, we're already
Sure.
dealing with
Sure.
whatever it is that we're dealing with. And,
Sure.
you know, and everybody, you know, has got that, you know, like, no matter it, everybody's got
Yeah.
their different struggles. Like, that's the whole thing, is we're all different. We all come from different struggles and all that. But I want to be able to help those that have that dream, that the world isn't out there to help them
Mm.
at
Mm.
all get towards
Mm.
their dreams. Like, there's nothing out there in the world like what I feel like I'm trying to do with differently abled entertainment, that
Yeah.
like, they're, uh, you know, that you can gain, you know, the gain experience, gain things. Cause yeah, I mean, we do a theater play, we have the 2 magazines, we do a theatrical play once a year. We're in post-production for one film that's already done filming. We're in
Nice.
pre-production for another film that's going to be filming. Um, Hopefully this fall. We're working on still trying to gain sponsors and all that. But our movie that's in post-production, In Terror, it's premiering at the Loft on May 7th. Get your tickets.
Nice.
Any left? They're
Shoot
going
me
fast.
a shoot me a text on that or a message. This way I can lock that in.
Yeah, because it's gonna be good. The trailer is on our website, which, just so you know, not the one that you went to, our new
Yes, I
website
know
that
now.
I've been working on. Yeah, because that's a Wix one that was started with who was my co-founder. But now, I mean, he's been very busy with his acting career, and so has stepped away from differently abled entertainment. I do have a new vice president, but I am now just considered the sole founder and
Sole
president.
founder and
Yeah.
president.
Just, there's been some shifts in the last couple years, since things had first started out, and that website was when we were first starting out. And then it
Sure.
was just kind of like, oh, and then I didn't even know it was still active. So there we go. But our new one is our day, like OURDAE.org.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, and
Uh,
on there, we have all of our events listed. We have our merch on there. We have ways for people to contact us if you want to volunteer, if you
ourday.org.
want to model, if you want to take pictures. Because that's the thing. I mean, we want to help promote artists on both sides, like whether you're behind the scenes person
Yep.
or in front of the scenes person. There's this one meme that I share almost every year because it comes up, and it's been coming up in my stuff for a while. But it's a picture of an iceberg, all right? And it's the perfect representation of the entertainment industry. The iceberg is like, you see the tip of the iceberg, you see the
Hmm.
actors, you see the people in front of this, you know, those are the ones that you see. But in order to get
Surface
those
level.
people there, there's the makeup artists, there's the cameramen, there's the sound guys, there's
Yeah.
the
Yeah. Yeah.
editors, there's the producers, there's the all the people that you don't see.
Underneath.
Okay.
Yeah.
We want to help build up not only the artists that you do see, but the people behind the scenes. And so we work with, you know, upcoming photographers. Like, if you want to, if you're just starting out photography, like, we're all inclusive. Like, we have people on our stuff that's been doing it for a really long time that they'll tell you some pointers or will help you out, or, you know, whatever. Like, we want to be a platform for people to learn and grow together, showcase their art, have some fun, and be able to then take what they get with us and apply it, to something that can make a difference in their lives,
For
like
sure.
a good job.
Of course. Yeah. 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 Something that they could. Yeah. I got you. For sure. Yeah. And so ourday.org, and I'm gonna actually have you recite this for me, because my next and final question to you is going to be around where people can get in touch with you. But before we do that, I wanted to say one more time, thank you, Jonni, for the interview and for your time and for shedding light on not just disability in general, but also how DAE, differently abled entertainment, can really assist people who are interested in the arts and entertainment, and recognize that representation not only matters but is available for you, at least if you're here in Tucson, and by accessing folks. So what I wanted to ask you now, Jonni, as we close out, is um, how can people get in touch with you? You just named a website, so maybe recite the website again. Is there any social media handles, maybe any personal handle you want to offer, anything like that?
Yeah. And just to touch on real quick what you said, yes, we are based out of Tucson, but we have writers on our magazine team from all across the United States.
Nice.
All of our meetings for our volunteers are held digitally. So if you're somebody that's interested in like web design or graphics or editing or all that, we live in the day and age that even if you're in the same town, you don't even have to go to the interview.
Yeah.
We live in the time of Zoom calls and email and technology. And so, yes, we are based out of Tucson, and yes, our photo shoots are here in Tucson and stuff like that. But we have fingers all over the nation, and we're getting to where we're all over the world a little bit. Our
Nice.
magazine is going to Australia, Ireland, Canada, like we're getting out there.
Wow.
And so I just want to put that out there too. Like, yes, okay, physically, if you're required to be here in Tucson for a said thing, then yeah, we probably can't do it. But I've had photographers do digital shoots with people over the internet. I've
Nice.
had, people that, like I said, we do everything over Google Meet. So it doesn't matter where you are in the nation or in the world. Like if you want to try to be involved with differently abled entertainment, you can. And
Good.
yes, we are all over all of the social medias. Mostly we utilize Facebook the most. And we have our public page that you can look up differently abled entertainment on there. We also have a public group attached to that page, differently abled entertainment. And then we have a private group where a lot of times I share things a little bit ahead of times, like before we do public announcements, we do
Hmm.
it in there first. And that's differently abled models, actors, and entertainers. And it's a private group that you got to answer some questions
Yeah,
in order to be accepted to.
for
But
sure.
pretty much we accept you as long as you answer the questions in a suitable manner. you know
Yeah, good.
um, that's our filter as far as that group's private. We do a little bit of like sneak peek, a little bit of like, oh, we're going to do this thing, and if there's only like 10 sign up spots, I let it out in that group first, for like a day or two before I announce it to the rest of the world. So it's
Yeah,
like the people that are in there kind of get the inside
it's
scoop and can,
like a membership. It's almost
yeah.
like
So
the platinum membership versus
yeah, yeah,
yeah.
it kind of is. It's like it's the inside scoop
That's right. Yeah, yeah.
place to be. So and then we're on Instagram. And that's, we're trying to get better. I'm trying to build up my social media team. A lot of things I do have volunteers and stuff like that, but I'm learning to delegate, and I'm learning how to have people try to encourage people to do the jobs I delegate to them, considering that they're all volunteers and there's no
Right.
really any kind of consequence or anything like that if you don't follow through.
Uh-huh.
Um, so then still a lot of it gets left for me to do in the end. And so yeah, that's why like our website, it's in the process, everything's kind of like I'm working through things, but I am one human being trying
That's
to
right.
do kind of a lot of
I
this
get it.
kind of just on my own and as I
I get
go,
it.
winging it and learning as I go. So yeah, we're on all the social medias. Like we're on Twitter, we're on Pinterest, we're on TikTok. We're on all of those, but we
All of
don't
them.
utilize them as much as we utilize Facebook and then Instagram.
Okay. Well, you're on the social medias. You have the website,
Yeah,
and folks can.
ourday.org. And it's coming together very nicely. And like events, if you're just interested in events, is events.ourday.org. Like we're
R
getting there.
as in OUR, like our.
As an R, yes, as in
Yes.
belonging to all of us.
Okay. Okay. Yeah.
My
Gotcha.
accent kind of
No, I
messes
got you. I
like
get it.
our
Our day.
our
Yeah.
our day.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you, Johnny, again for a wonderful chat today. Always a pleasure getting to connect. I haven't seen you in person in a while, so hopefully we get to cross paths on the
Yeah,
microphone sooner than later.
right.
All right, y'all. Well, in that, it's me, Dr. Sherrod Robbins. I'm here with Jonni Campbell, and you are on the chopping block here at visceralchange.org.